Did you get all that? I see some of you looking nervous now. But seriously, did you get all that? Because that's a lot. Oh man, that's a lot. What would Jesus do? Remember that? Did anybody have a bracelet? WWJD? What would Jesus do? It's a thing. Nobody had really? Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Yeah. Sure. It's a thing, and it's a great. Honestly, it is a really good thing. I'm going to say something different about it in a second, but it really is a good thing because particularly I remember as a young person, particularly, and I know what you're saying. How do you remember being a young person? That was a long time ago, but I remember when I was younger, and what would Jesus do was a thing, and it's a great idea. What would Jesus do? Just take a moment, pause in this situation, think, what would Jesus do? Except, hear me out on this. What would Jesus do? So, first of all, you need to determine what would Jesus do in order that you can then do what Jesus would do. Except, you're not Jesus, and you can analyze all of the things that Jesus did, and we can look at all of the things that Jesus said and all of the things that Jesus wanted to do and everything, and still not truly be able to know in that moment what would Jesus do. Can you imagine Jesus going, what would Dwayne do in this situation? What would Iris do? What would Damien do in this situation? I'd really like to know, what would Alan do in this situation? I would do. Just think about it for a minute, because it means you are being someone else. You're determining what someone else would do, and then do what someone else would do. So there's two things about that. The first is you're doing what someone else would do. So, and perhaps you have already thought this through and thought that's exactly actually what it means to you, but what would Jesus do isn't the same as, what have I learned of Jesus that would teach me how to behave now in this moment? What do I know of Jesus that would show me what to do? Let me go back to that first thing there, because I used the most important word, which is the other thing about this. What would Jesus do? It's about behavior. It's about the action piece. But action isn't born out of impersonation, right? It's born out of what is in you. And that's the tricky part. What would Jesus do is simply imitation. And in fact, there's actually Thomas Kempis. So I'm looking to the theologian in the room to help me out here. On the imitation of Christ. Famous book from many centuries ago on the imitation of Christ. In fact, one of Paul's letters suggests to people that they imitate Christ. Okay. Except, again, we're still talking about behavior. And Jesus is not about behavior. Not at all. See, I think that's what this really weird little vignette from Luke is about. And it's set up with Jesus challenging behavior. Samaritans in a village did not receive Jesus appropriately as far as the other disciples were concerned. Their behavior was not appropriate to receiving Jesus. So what are we going to do? We shall smite them mightily and call down fire and balls of flame upon them and destroy them. And Jesus, of course, says, awesome idea, I'm on board with that. Of course not. Of course not. First of all, they're Samaritans, okay? They're historically enemies of Jews, right? Of course they're not going to want to receive Jesus in the first place, but also the key part of this story is that this is the point in Luke's gospel where Jesus has decided he knows where he's going. He knows what the end game is, and he's already headed there. He's headed to Jerusalem, right? But again, the disciples, they think this is inappropriate behavior, we shall smite them. And Jesus is, no, don't do that. In fact, I think Luke's, the wording in that translation is, Jesus rebukes them. So I interpret rebuke as meaning more than just no. I think what happened in that moment was Jesus kind of went, oh, geez, do you guys not listen? And he challenged them to think about what it was that they were talking about doing. And go beyond what that action, like why would you think that was a good idea? Why are we doing that? I'm teaching you about loving each other and loving your enemies and everything and all that good stuff, and you want to smite these guys because they're different than us, that they didn't receive me appropriately. Where did I show you that behavior was appropriate? And then they move on, and as they're walking on, there are three little pieces here. Someone comes and says they're going to follow Jesus forever, wherever he goes, and Jesus very creatively points out to them that they have no idea where Jesus is going. The Son of Man has nowhere to lay the Son of Man has no home, is what it sounds like Jesus is saying. The fox has a den, birds have nests. We all have really nice houses or apartments or condos or tents, whatever we might call home. But even then, what is home? I just said it was buildings and places and spaces. But it isn't. You know it isn't, right? That's not what makes it home. It's not about a nice building. There's something else that makes it home. Hold on to that thought for a second. And they move on. He calls someone to say, come and follow me. Well, I'm my father just died. I have to bury him. There's rituals to go through. There's things to do. Rituals to do and things that have to happen. Well, okay. And right away we're thinking, geez, Jesus, come on, man. Cut the guy some slack. His dad just died. Let him do the... Is Jesus really saying, no, this is more important? Or is Jesus maybe challenging the behaviors that go around that? The rituals around death? Knowing that Jesus preaches new life. I think what Jesus is doing here is he's challenging the ritual. He's challenging the behavior. Remember, Jesus is the guy that said, I don't come to bring people together. I come to break them apart. And we all go, wow, oh, what? But of course, what he means is he's challenging the structures, the society. He's challenging our systems and saying, look, you built all this stuff up, and all it does is exclude people. All it does is break things apart. It doesn't bring people together. Get rid of that. Focus on connecting with people. Focus on loving your enemy. Focus on sharing with the poor. Focus on doing those things that bring you together with people. That's what connects you. So we got a little bit farther. And here's somebody who's going to follow Jesus, but he wants to say goodbye to the people he's going to be leaving behind. Wow, heartless, Jesus. That's really heartless. All he wants to do is just say goodbye to his family, and then he's going to come. Again, is it really heartless? Or is it, again, just reminding us that we've set up structures and rituals and behaviors? The part about putting your hand to the plow is, so we need a really, really elderly farmer who remembers horse-drawn plows. Anybody? I'm not looking at anyone in the room. You want a straight furrow, right? Are you going to get that if you look behind you? Or are you going to get it if you look forward? You're going to get it from looking forward, right? That's the point. Don't look behind. Don't look back. Go forward. I don't think any of these things are meant to sound, I mean, they do to us because we're all about the behavior, but they're not meant to sound nearly as heartless as they do. Because we're all about the behavior. We're all about the rituals we've learned. We're all about how we've learned to do things. And I think that's precisely the point. It isn't about that. Jesus isn't about how you should behave. Jesus isn't about teaching you how you should behave. When he says, love each other the way I showed you, he doesn't mean here's the routine, just do this. When Jesus says take care of the poor, he doesn't mean here's an outline of how you can do that. Just follow this technical manual for caring for the poor and you'll be fine. Doesn't mean that. And surely, if there were a manual for how to love your neighbor, we'd all have that. But there isn't, because that's not the point. The freedom that Paul talks about as first century interpretation of Jesus as Paul is. And remember, that's what Paul is, right? Paul is one of the first people to start sharing the story, but also interpreting it by sharing the story. Right? He's sharing what he's sharing in these letters with people is how to live well. Oh, wait, it's kind of like a manual. How to live well with each other. So it's going to include some practical stuff. It surely is. It's going to include some stuff about behavior. But it's going to include a lot of stuff about spirit, which is sometimes what's so confusing about Paul, because this passage surely sounds like Paul's saying all that physical stuff that you like and enjoy, stop doing that. There's only the Spirit. Don't enjoy life. There's only the Spirit. And again, it's all about behavior, though. It's all about actions that we do. And right away, you might be thinking, oh, wait, so are you telling us that we don't live out what Jesus teaches us? Are we not supposed to put into action what Jesus says? Yes, you absolutely are. What I'm saying is you can't do one or the other. Jesus has never been and never will be an either or. It's an and. Jesusing is and. We need the words, we need the actions, but you can't do that without the heart. It's not just about behavior, it's about what's in your heart. That's what Jesus is all about. We can behave, but it's still just behavior unless it's connected to what's in your heart. We can go through the motions of doing the right thing, but unless that's what's truly in your heart, you're simply going through the motions of the right behavior, or what you think is the right behavior. It has to be spirit. It has to be us finding that connection to that which is inside of us that is the image of God. Right? From the very beginning, we are created in the image of God. So God looks like us physically because we are in the image of God, right? No. Remember how God used to be an old man with a white beard sitting on? We anthropomorphized that, and we made God look like us. Because if we're created in the image of God, well, that must be... No. It's what's in you that's the image of God. It's that love that Jesus wants to draw out. It's that connection to each other. Because we're all of God and of the earth. All of us. Doesn't matter whether we look the same, act the same, talk the same. use the same words or same language. It doesn't matter. We are all connected. And it's that connection, that spirit piece, that Jesus wants to connect with and let you know that that's what you need in order to live it out. You can't just imitate the behavior. There must be spirit, the spirit at the heart of it. Again, even whatever language we use, the image of God, reflection of God, Jesus. I personally am still working on trying to get everyone to use the term Jesusing. But I don't mean just action. To do good Jesusing requires heart. It requires Jesus, knowing Jesus is in your heart. That the image of God that you reflect is there at the heart of everything. Otherwise, you can do all the right things. You can follow Jesus. You can go through all of the right rituals at the appropriate times in life. You can make sure that you communicate with the appropriate people as you do things in life, because communication is important. But if there isn't something else there, if there isn't something behind that, the spirit, the heart, the love, that is the thing that connects us all, that's the piece that's missing. I think Paul goes a little overboard. That was, I don't know if you noticed, but the list of things that you're not supposed to do is twice as long as the list of good stuff. But his point is perfectly sound. As good as all that stuff might be, as good as it might make you feel in the moment, if there isn't love and grace and peace, and if all of that stuff isn't part of it, then it's just going through the motions. It's just saying the right words. It's just, there's no heart to it. And that's what Jesus is all about. Jesus isn't asking you to go one way or the other. Sorry, Paul. Because that kind of sounds, doesn't that sound like what Paul is saying? It's this. Don't do these things. It's this. I think Jesus is an and. Jesusing involves a lot of and with. It's not either or. Those things need to be connected for them to have true meaning, for them to be heartfelt, for us to experience Jesus in our lives, to know God, to know love. Those things need to be connected. That's what Jesus is trying to say here. You got to have heart. I feel I should break into a song now, but you got to have heart. Let's break into a song now.